like some of the footballs that you see on YouTube.
Oh, I know.
They mess them up. So you hear the announcers saying what the actually goes through.
Somebody was trying to say to me, when I watch the recording on YouTube, the YouTube is 4 seconds faster.
Education. It's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Nowadays, yeah. No, I went to the in 2022 meetings. Practice was trying to pick up on more things. It's time consuming. And all you can press will be some vote. You know, some of the that's on the agenda will be fast forward. You can obviously policy discussion. You have to sit there and listen to it. But sometimes you can actually fast forward. Oh my God, yes. There was a mention of the government county. This thing that I'm not gonna hear it right this minute. Has to go, we discussed this too. And that Zoom version will be on there.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call this November 6, 2023 work session to order. And Dr. Smith, if you don't mind, are you able to do a roll call?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Saylor. Dr. Campley? Mr. Dorr?
Here.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
Here.
Mr. Fountain?
Here.
Mr. Keenan?
Here.
Dr. Kolar?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here.
Mrs. Mayers? Mr. Saylor?
I'm here. Thank you very much. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. I'll just open up the floor for comments on any topic. Does anyone have anything to talk about? Okay, we'll move on. Yes, it was. Yeah. I'll open it up again. Would anyone like to make a public comment?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Glad to see you all. Alicia Rosas from Skippack Township. And I was really thinking a lot about the state of the board, the community, and what I wanted to say on the eve of the election. And I landed on the topic of just how sad I am about where we are. And yes, I'm going to place the blame of the accountability of our state on the Republican majority, as after all, you are the current leaders and you set the agenda. You need to own the situation and that you've created and own your actions. What I've seen over the last 2 years is that you've chosen to spend the board's time and our time inventing outrage over issues that don't exist while fomenting an environment of not just disagreement, but violence in our community. And I'm referring to the 3 following incidents that happened over the last 6 weeks. On September 21st, our community experienced a bomb threat that was serious enough that all children in all 7 schools had to be evacuated and sent home, creating a traumatic and chaotic event. And what precipitated this event? We had a bathroom policy that complied with the law, and that was passed 4 years ago by some members, even on the Republican side, and that never once had an issue in those 4 years until September, when a female student may or may not have seen a boy in the bathroom, and nothing bad actually happened. And then our board president made it an issue, and now we have bomb threats to our school over hate of LGBTQ kids. On October 3rd, the day after the Republican majority voted to approve the Policy 720 that violates the current law under Title IX, we had anti-trans hate messages were placed on stop signs by Evergreen Elementary, and further threatening our already marginalized community of trans students. Then on the 25th, a PV forward sign, yard sign, with what appeared to be bullet holes was dropped off on a supporter's lawn. And whether it was actual bullet holes or not really doesn't matter, because the threat was clear. And what really made me sad was that the Republican majority did nothing to condemn any of these actions. But it doesn't have to be this way. And so as a community, how do we come back from this? Since Thanksgiving is around the corner, I was thinking about that standard etiquette that many of us employ at such events, which is never discuss politics or religion in polite company. So as PV goes forward, I hope that we can leave the politics out of it and leave the religion out of it. This is a public school in the service of everyone, and as public servants, your job is to listen actively to your constituents and make good faith efforts to search for solutions that are in the best interest of all students, every single one of them. And I hope that we can return to this focus on the students starting right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to make a public comment?
Hi, yes. A little electric static there. Hi, Terry, Collegeville Borough. I'm here to report that my child, who's a member of the LGBTQ community, has been adhering to the bathroom policy that you all, the board majority, passed. And I'd like to report that my child is missing 20 minutes of class time due to your policy. And, because it takes him quite a while to get to the bathroom. And there's days where he just doesn't go because he's afraid to, because of the environment that this board majority has created in the school district. And for those of you who voted for this, I ask that you look at me, Mr. Keenan, because I'm talking to all of you. I sent an email to this board to report the impact on my child, and I only got one reply, and that was from you, Ms. Mares, which I appreciate. However, the response really wasn't all that helpful, because you just encouraged me to send my child to the counselor, which is not going to get my kid back in class on time. So not effective, but I do appreciate that you responded to me. Mr. Saylor, I specifically asked you to respond, and I even invited you for coffee so that we could discuss it productively, but there's been no response. So I'm reporting this. This board has done nothing to respond. You guys, you report that you value in-person education, but you've been silent to my complaints that my child is missing class time. My child's been an honor student, a good student, and nobody has replied. You passed this policy recklessly without a plan to how these kids are going to get to class. And my kid is missing a lot of time from class because of your policy. Furthermore, I see that your supporters, the 5 for PV folks, are out there late at night, 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, posting "they'll hurt your kids" signs out there, those yellow ones that we all see on the corners and stuff. But I'm here to tell you that you are hurting my kids. You are hurting my child, and you're violating his civil rights to use whatever bathroom he likes, and you're violating his right to a public education. I see you out there telling people that we're going to hurt your kids. You, and your supporters are hurting our kids. Not me, not the PV forward. So the truth is that you really don't care about our kids. You care about your political careers. You care about your personal biases, and that's it. If you cared about kids, you wouldn't bring your gun onto campus. If you cared about kids, you wouldn't call them lesser students, Ms. Mayer. So please look at me. I'm talking to you.
You can address your comments towards me.
Okay, great. Mr. Keenan loves, carries his Bible, very religious. Good for you. But why don't you practice the practices of Jesus if that's what you really care about, if you care about kids? And if you cared about kids, you wouldn't pass a policy that violates their civil rights and the rights to an education. Follow the money, people in the community. Look at where they're getting their money from. Moms for Liberty, 1776 Project PAC. Follow the money. Springford. Anybody from Springford who's listening to this meeting, listen up, because they're coming after your kids next. They're following the MO4 playbook verbatim. Watch, look at the other school districts where they're here, and they come to these meetings regularly. So if you really cared about kids, you wouldn't be destroying
Oh,
public
thank you very much for your
education.
time. Have a good day.
You wouldn't be destroying
Thank you very
public
much for your time.
education.
Have
So
a
get
good
these
night.
votes,
Thank
get
you
out
very
there,
much.
and get these clowns to
Very
take their
much.
circus somewhere else. Go away.
Thank you very much. Such an enjoyable comment. Anyone next? Anyone else? Going once, twice, and sold. Okay. Student liaison report.
Thank you. So as we come to the quarter of the holiday season, we like to take some time to congratulate accomplishments by some of the fall athletes and bands and stuff like that. Specifically, we'd like to give a shout out to Ian Johnson, Sienna Miller, and Ali Matsich, who competed in the PIAA cross country states this weekend and represented PV well. Secondly, we'd like to congratulate participants of the high school fall play, SNAP, who put on a wonderful show this weekend. And finally, a big congratulations to our PV marching band, who were named state champions earlier this season and then national champions at the U.S. Bands Competition at MetLife Stadium this past Saturday.
Looking forward, there's many things on the horizon that we're excited and we'd like to encourage the community to attend and support. The high school powder puff game between the junior and senior girls is an exciting event and it'll be held this November 14th. We hope to see some of you there supporting our high school athletes. And our final announcement is that as the school board election fastly approaches, we'd like to encourage individuals in the community to exercise their civic duty in a respectful manner and remind them to represent PV well. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. I have no president's report this week. A superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Saylor. For this evening's report, I have 3 items that I would like to touch upon. I'd like to showcase our students and some nice achievements, and I'll echo some of what Mr. Kenworthy mentioned. I want to talk about the superintendent's objective performance standards and then transitions. So let's start with some of the great achievements of our students. Dr. Smith and I were invited to a soft opening of the North Montco Technical Career Center restaurant recently. And they serve breakfast and lunch a couple of days a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays. If you happen to be interested, it was really a lovely meal. It was excellent. And I would encourage you, if you have the time and the interest, to visit them. Our students take great pride in what they do there, and they're passionate about the work. So this bottom picture here, Dr. Smith and I were right back there, seated at a table, and we had a wonderful lunch. It was a buffet lunch. This is a picture from last year, the holiday dinner, and then these are 2 students working in culinary. So nice work on the part of our students, and we look forward to a nice restaurant season for them this year. I attended the play on Saturday night, so to echo some of what Mr. Kenworthy mentioned, it was really an interesting performance. It was a little different from some of the typical plays that are performed here by our students, where there were a series of very brief pieces that students performed from a variety of different performances. So it really kept your attention and kept us moving, and there was some great humor in some of what was presented. Again, dedication and passion on the part of our students, and it was really nice to see people that came out to attend their performance. So nice job to all of them, as well as the directors, Ms. Eskin and Mrs. Giorgio. And then later that night, Saturday night, with some great fanfare, our marching band students returned from MetLife Stadium, and again, as national champions in that competition. So that's something to be really proud of. There were first responders that escorted them up Campus Drive, back to the high school, to their cars, and on their way home. And there's, on the Music Boosters Facebook page, you can see a short little video of that, and it was really nice to see for our students. So outstanding job. They've had an outstanding season, really. Congratulations to them. So oftentimes, I review with the community the shared beliefs that have been a part of our comprehensive plan really since 2017. And I thought I would transition this month to talking about some of the superintendents as well as assistant superintendents' objective performance standards. So just as the comprehensive plan establishes goals for us as a district, and these shared beliefs, some of the broader targets that we aim for, Dr. Smith and I, in our roles, have objective performance standards, or goals, if you want, very similar in terms of the meaning. There are 6 categories that we think about in our leadership, one being student growth and achievement, organizational leadership, operations and finance, communication and community relations, resource management, and then professionalism. So I wanted to talk a little bit about student growth and achievement, just to give you a little taste of some of the data that we're getting back from last year in advance of that comprehensive data presentation that occurs in January. And then I'll talk a little bit about communication and community relations, an area that I think we need to continue to focus on as we move through the fall. So student growth and achievement, when we think about, well, what are you doing as you lead to improve student growth, academic growth, and achievement? Well, we look at our curricula to make sure their standards aligned and that they are set up to prepare students for what they will eventually be assessed on. We think about the resources that we have available to support how we progress monitor or check for understanding. We have child study teams where we really learn about our students as learners and think about how we target their needs or enhance their strengths. We have MTSS teams who do something similar, but really consider the whole child. Not only the academics for that child, but also the health and well-being of that child. We think about our practices in the classroom, the counseling services we offer, and the professional development we offer our teachers, any of our staff really, as well as how we engage our parents. And there's lots of research that supports the stronger parent engagement, the more likely our students are to be successful. So some of the areas that we work on. When we talk about student growth and achievement, I just want to share with you some data that we received last week, and I'm focusing on the high school and some of the Keystone scores. Growth, the academic growth as reported by the state, is something that the state calculates, and it's a very complex formula. However, we're looking for at least 1 year's growth on the part of every student, 1 year's academic growth. And the state uses a very complex formula to figure that out, and they look particularly at cohorts of students as opposed to individual students. And what we see here for 2023 is that at the high school in Algebra 1, biology, and literature, our students grew quite extensively. They exceeded the growth standard, and where there is this almost half parentheses, they extended beyond even that high level. So some really nice achievement. And now you might say, well, how does that compare to years past for the high school? Because the high school is an area where we've really been focusing to try and support our students academically as a result of really some of the past year's experiences. So this table shows you the growth indicator. How did our high school students grow based upon those that took the Algebra 1 Keystone, the Biology Keystone, or the Literature Keystone? Well, in 2021, this is where the algebra students were. This is where they are in 23. When it comes to biology, this is growth in 21, 22, 23, and literature. They really struggled a couple of years ago and have demonstrated some growth. So again, this is one data point that we look at as we put together the picture of how our students are doing, how they're growing as academic students, how they're achieving as students, and then what we need to think about as a school district to continue to support good outcomes, strong outcomes. So again, this is just one piece of data. We'll talk more about this when we get to that comprehensive data presentation in January. But some preliminarily good news for the high school students. These are some scatter plots that show you where we fall. You want to be in the upper right quadrant here. And Perkiomen Valley High School, this is for Algebra 1, is here in terms of the achievement versus growth. So you want to be positive and high in both of those areas. This is literature. So this is Perkiomen Valley High School. And this is biology. So it's nice to see for each of those cohorts, they ended up in that upper right quadrant, indicating stronger achievement, stronger growth than would otherwise be presented if they were in any of the other quadrants. So we'll continue to support the efforts there, but some nice data at this point based upon the academic growth of our students. I'll transition to a second objective performance standard for the superintendent and assistant superintendent, and that's really around communication and community relations. So some of the things that we do are to really engage our parent community through superintendent roundtables and other types of parent meetings as needed, really. We will most likely have conversations related to full-day kindergarten as the year progresses. We have tried to facilitate more meetings with parents of our exceptional students, again, to engage them in the experiences of our students and what we can do to support them and improve them. My communication also extends to our faculty and staff, as well as our students, and I have regular conversations with high school students in particular, less regular with middle, a couple of times a year, and then once a year typically with elementary level students, but great perspectives are offered by our students. And we have been focusing with the high school group that I've been meeting with on the profile of an effective teacher. So sometimes we think about, well, what's the profile of a successful graduate today? What are we aiming for in our students? I'm talking to our students about the profile of a teacher that they believe is effective in them realizing learning. Great conversations. I also engage with the chamber, the foundation. We do some work with Ursinus and the Rotary. I will be meeting with municipality leaders from each of our 6 municipalities, and then, of course, North Montco, and you as a board, as often as is necessary, weekly at a minimum, and then as often as is necessary. So communication and community relations is something that I focus very heavily on and will continue to do as we move forward into the fall. So that gives you just some sense of some of the expectations on the part of a superintendent as well as assistant superintendent. We'll talk a little bit more about those as we move forward and we think about the work of the district. And lastly, I'll talk about transitions. So we have 2 of our 5 board members whose seats are up, actually saying goodbye. Mrs. Evans-Brockett and Dr. Kolar, I would like to thank you for your service, sincerely, for your service over the years. And I would also like to thank Mr. Dorr, Mrs. Mares, and Ms. White. It has not been an easy several years for the terms plus that many of you have served on the board. And to Mr. Dorr, Mrs. Mares, and Ms. White, I thank you for your continued willingness to serve as you embark upon the election tomorrow. But to all 5 of you, honestly, thank you for all that you have given to the school district. And to those moving on, I wish you well and thank you. To those who are still in the running, I hope it works out in the way that you would like. But transitions are tough. They happen every 2 years here at the board level. And this year we have 5. So wishing all the best. And that ends my report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Subers, do you have anything?
I do not.
Any board members have any district committee reports? Seeing none, the consent agenda is presented without objection. Mr. Fountain, education.
Good evening, everybody. That would be the day. I would love it if Dr. Russell would dance with me. Yes, this is the last Education Committee of the Whole that I will present to you, and I have to say it's probably the shortest one in my time here, and it's a lot of acknowledgments and celebrations. You'll notice there's not a lot on the education agenda this month. It just happened to work out that way. But we have a couple of items, again, just for me to share. There are no agenda items this month in education except the enrollment report. So every year we do report to the school board what are our planned field trips, at least our main ones that are curricularly curricularly related in grades K to 8. So this is pretty similar to what it has been in the past. There's a couple of changes as our curriculum has changed, or we've looked at new places that may align more. If you recall, this is also the first year that the district is funding the K to 8 field trips, 1 per grade level, based upon our revision of policy 121. I will make one note, 6th grade is in a bit of a transition, so there are 2 trips. One of them will be funded by the district, and the other one has additional funding sources and is more of a team building activity. And then that will be adjusted for next year. I also wanted to share with you about a partnership we have with Ursinus. I think I may have reported on this quite a while ago about a grant through PDE that Ursinus applied for and needed a partner in K-12 public education to work with them on really, it's called the Prep to Practice, really strengthening that relationship and that pipeline of teachers and student teachers that are going into the profession, that are coming out of secondary education and are looking to come into being a teacher. And so we partnered with them. This allowed for a stronger connection in terms of setting up our mentors with student teachers as they come into the district. There's also new requirements from PDE that these pre-service teachers need to get into schools much sooner than student teaching. So they come for a practicum, which is 2 weeks, and then we keep them paired with the exact same teacher for their student teaching to create better relationships. And then part of this includes the grant funding, included some professional development for the mentors, some time with the student teachers. I have attended Ursinus classes and presented to the pre-service students. And then we just held a big event on November 3rd. Dr. Russell was there, as well as other administrators from PV, along with over 13 other school districts were represented. And it's always great. We were able to get superintendents from these districts to come together and district level leaders. We had a keynote and we really just talked about what are our innovative ways that we can strengthen the pipeline. How do we encourage more of our students to want to go into education? And then how do we retain high quality as well as attract high quality? So lots of great collaboration happened, and it was just a really nice event for us to be partnering with Ursinus on. We have had one ACT 80 Day on October 9th and another one coming up tomorrow. And I love these pictures here. I know Dr. Russell's probably not so happy I put the one in the middle there, but it's a great picture of her. October 9th, you can see our agenda on the right. We had a lot of learning on this day. We did our required structure literacy training. We as a district decided that all staff in district would participate in that. We were only required by the state to have certain certifications, but we felt it was that important that all staff understand structured literacy, the science of reading, as we all are responsible for what reading looks like. We had some curriculum connections where they had time to work on their curriculum, instruction, teaching practices, and so forth. Secondary had some data dives, and then you can see we sprinkled in some other activities throughout to balance the day out, and that's what you'll see. I called it learning like party animals, because we were learning, but they also had times where we brought in these animals, and I will tell you what a hit they were with the staff, and really kind of boosted some morale on that day. So it was a great day for learning as well as some enjoyment. And then tomorrow is our big ACT 80 Day, where we put on our own little mini conference. So it is called the Voyage Conference. I think this is maybe our 4th year in doing this. This year's theme is aligned to our professional development plan. We're in the 3rd year of that, and it's high impact teaching strategies. So tomorrow, Mrs. O'Sullivan and Mrs. Matei will be presenting Teaching with Purpose, a winning playbook for impactful learning. We're kind of going on the HITS theme, or sports related. So we have our little Viking there, and we have lots of different teaching strategies offered. We have Act 55 requirement that all staff will participate in tomorrow, and we have some wellness workshops. So over 40 workshops were offered, and then based upon the schedule, they had to choose one for the Act 55, and then the other 2 were really choice for them. And so everybody is signed up, and we're ready to go. We are trying to model universal design for learning, where we're very tight on what our goal is. We want staff to walk away with an understanding of high impact teaching strategies and what they can use in their classroom, but be flexible on means by allowing them some choice in what that might look like for them throughout the day. So hopefully next month, maybe there'll be some pictures to share with you. And then one other thing too that was very successful, this was back on October 4th, but we had our annual ELD Family Night. This is only the 2nd time we have done it, and it's the first time we did it in the fall, trying to reach out to these families a little bit earlier in the year. So we were at Middle School East, and you can see we had pumpkin painting as different activities, and then our ELD specialists or ESL specialists that I listed there also presented to the families, and we had several vendors or organizations that were there as well to be able to interact with those families and help to support them. This was also the first year that our food service department provided a lasagna dinner for all of the families that came. So we had about 60, I think, people joining us that night. It was just really well attended, and the families were just so grateful to be there. And it was amazing to see our 5 teachers just interacting with them and hearing the different languages and really just celebrating the diversity among us. And we had lots of sponsors for this event. So we have a very small budget to pull it off, but each of these places donated in some way that helped us either with prizes or things we needed to purchase for that night. So we're very grateful to those. And the program planning preview really is just to give you a recap of what this process looks like, as you will see the official program plan come to you in December. So program planning is an annual process that our high school goes through. Really, at the start of the school year, we're starting to plan already for the next school year. And so Dr. Moss works with the high school staff to look at what current courses do we offer, what might we want to maybe recommend a new course or change a particular course, a course description or a prerequisite. They submit those to Dr. Moss and administration, who then reviews all of that and narrows down what it is we believe we want to bring forward. Those all will get presented to you in December, and we will ask for your approval of those recommendations. And then once approved, we begin to create the program plan and the whole course request process for the 24-25 school year. So there are a few new courses I think that they are considering right now and working with teachers, some prerequisite changes, some course description changes that I'm sure Dr. Russell will share in upcoming memos, and certainly in the December board meeting that you'll get those details on what it is we are considering. And that is all that I have. Again, there are no agenda items in the education section tonight, but are there any questions for me?
Good luck, Jim. Good luck beating that record.
And I guess for the last time, thank you very, very much, Dr. Smith. So, 4.02 is just the enrollment report.
Thank you very much. Business, Ms. White.
5.01 is the Finance Committee of the Whole. Mr. Weaver?
You even turn off the microphone. Good evening, everybody. Business happens. Thank you. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So actually, tonight's a very important night for financially for the school district. We're going to report out on our first go around for 24-25 revenues. We're going to look at how we did last year. We're going to look at an annual report for capital projects. I'm going to try to make that as short and succinct as possible, but it's something that we need to do from a capital projects perspective, so that we're fully aware that we're meeting the requirements of the law to get this information out to the school board so that we can look at that. So moving forward, we'll jump right into the first look. Revenues for 24-25. Again, much in the same manner as the program planning guide, as Dr. Smith just said. On the financial side, we never truly stop budgeting and looking at budgets, how we're doing, actuals to the budget, and looking at trend and analysis. It never ends for us. So jumping right into it, the first look for the revenues for next year. You can see here we basically keep the same process that we've had for years now at this point in time. We backfill a lot of that information. We're looking at total revenues for 24-25 of $125,252,964. That is in the column all the way over to the right there, right before the variances, and you can see most of that growth is in local revenues. We'll go through that. There's backup sheets associated with that. Overall, right now, remember, we still have 9 full months to go, essentially, for how we're doing this year and how that projects to next year and all the economic data that we're looking at. It's about a 1.3% growth. There's an assessment that we have in there from an assumed percentage increase. We'll continue to monitor that. So here we go. Here's a cut of the local revenues. The biggest gain, without a doubt, is in the earned income taxes, and that is reflected also in how we did for 22-23 year, and you'll see that report after this one. So we are actually showing an increase of $1 million. So we're almost approaching the $16 million mark. And yes, we have backfilled the audited figures at this point in time. It still says unaudited, but they're pretty much done at this point in time. 16.15 million was collected for 22-23. And you can compare that to what the budgeted number was, and that is a significant positive variance that we'll talk about when we hit upon how we did for 22-23. So we actually show that reflection there. That is the biggest growth there. Speaking of state monies, most of these state monies are static at this point in time, with the exception of the following three items. Social Security and PVSD/retirement, of course, is a variable associated with the actual expenditure. So 50% of every dollar that we send in for PVSD and Social Security, we get back in the form of revenue subsidy. Obviously, salaries drive those items. So as we continue to build and show you the equal sign in December, those numbers will be adjusted as we actually reflect the total salaries that we're going to project for 24-25. The other point to note at this point in time is the basic instructional subsidy, sometimes called the ESB. For those of you who have been around for a while, you do know that the state is changing the way that they fund those. There are now 6 variables that go into that actual dollar stream, revenue stream. I'm happy to report that I've been working with Frontline Analytics. They used to be the Forecast 5 that we belong to. And I've volunteered for us to be the guinea pig on how the new ESB will work. It is complicated. It is much more, like I said, the 6 variables. And these 6 variables are not just how Perkiomen Valley is performing and how that impacts us, but how we're performing in the world of 499 other school districts. So, to put that into perspective, while we might be changing in one of these 6 variables, could be poverty, could be free and reduced lunch applications, could be local economic effort, sometimes called the LECI. These are all new terms that we're learning. They've been around forever, but now these are part of the new funding formula going forward. And they change, again, not just according to us and how we do, but how we do in perspective with other school districts throughout the entire state. So we might raise our hand and say, hey, we're more poor because we have a higher free and reduced lunch application. But in perspective to how other school districts are, we might actually be more of a positive. So that might have a negative influence on the number of dollars that are driven out by this funding formula. So we've got to be very careful with that. So I volunteered us to be the guinea pigs, and that will all happen behind the scenes. But the one good thing from this is after we learn about this, we'll pretty much know what our funding formula is for next year. And it will definitely change year to year. So we've got to pay attention to these 6 funding variables moving forward. So it's no longer the hold harmless where we got last year plus 2%. It's completely changed at this point in time. And it could negatively impact our ability to project, not just next year, but in a 5-year projection. You might see us say, we're going to throw our hands up. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet, but we'll look at that. And that is one of our largest state funding formula items that we need to pay attention to. The other big one is, of course, PVSD, and we can more predict that because we know what we put in to the front end of the canister variable, and we know what the percentage rate will be coming out. A lot more simple for us to calculate. Overall, $27 million in state revenues. Again, that's a much smaller component than the local, which we know. And then the federal monies are $691,000 at this point in time, and we'll continue to monitor those. So again, total $125,252,000, a growth at this point in time of almost $1.5 million, which is a 1.3% growth at this point in time. Just remember, we will keep in mind that the ESB will change, and we'll bring those factors forward as soon as we can. And of course, the PVSD and FICA numbers will of course change as we put the dollar figures in for our salaries moving forward. Here's a quick chart that shows that. This does not surprise anybody. That blue bar continues to get larger and larger. That's our local sources for Perkiomen Valley. These questions don't normally change too much because these are the questions that we ask at this stage in the budgetary process. We continue to be curious about our alternative revenue streams, such as interest earnings, real estate transfer taxes, and interim real estate taxes. We try our best to look at data and growth or negative impacts, and then we try to apply that to the world economics that are impacting us and how they might drive those. We all know that over the past couple of years, interest earnings have gone from a 0.01% to north of 5%. That is a huge growth. That's a huge alternative revenue stream for us. I've reflected that in the 24-25 numbers at this point in time. Here is a snapshot and a chart that shows just those three items that we continue to track. Obviously, those bars continue to get bigger and larger. And for next budget steps, we'll have the equal sign presentation in December. We continue to look at and wait for the Act 1 resolution documents to come from the state. Last year, we were ahead of the game. We approved the Act 1 resolution. We wouldn't go above the Act 1 resolution. And then the law says within 5 days of approval, you have to fill out the forms, but the forms weren't ready. So we had to wait for that. So this year, we're taking a wait and see approach. We'll wait for the state to tell us when those forms are available, and then we'll immediately bring it forward for board discussion. Obviously, 5.3% is, again, like I said last month, the highest that I've seen it since we've started under Act 1. We'll also have the 5-year projection next in December, and the PSERS rate will officially be set for the 24-25 year in December 2023. Remember, last year it actually went down. We were at 34.9, and they actually brought it back down to 34%. Again, mainly driven by the interest in investment earnings of the funds that were making their appearance readily known. And of course, the governor is expected to present the Commonwealth budget in February. So those are some key factors and some key dates moving forward. Any questions on the revenues at this stage? Very early, but this is the process at this point in time. Okay. Any questions from the public on that? Okay, thank you. Moving on into the yearly capital projects presentation, I will ask Mr. Fabrizio to come up with me. And Joe, if you can bring up the blue binder there, or the blue package. All right.
Sorry, I got a question.
Yes.
Where's the budget for the lawsuits that are going to be coming at you guys?
We'll move on. Go ahead.
No, I had a question.
There is no lawsuit, so there's no budget for our lawsuit. Okay, thank you. Keep going.
No, I want an answer to my question.
Yeah, the lawsuit would,
A lawsuit.
a lawsuit would be covered by insurance. A preliminary case analysis would be submitted to the insurance adjuster along with a preliminary budget depending upon the nature of the allegations in the lawsuit.
Dr. Campley, does that answer your question?
I believe the question was.
Does that answer your question? Yes.
Hi, Judy Lofton from Skippack. I'm just curious whether our insurance actually provides coverage for lawsuits that are the result of intentional illegal actions by the board.
You're asking a hypothetical question that's not in the budget.
I'm just curious about the insurance coverage.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you've asked a hypothetical question. That's not part of the budget presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Weaver.
I'm sorry, Mr. Saylor. We moved to Finance Committee meetings of the whole so that we could have these discussions with the public. So when else would be an appropriate time to have
A hypothetical question on a hypothetical lawsuit? Where would it be in the hypothetical budget?
I actually think you're being quite ignorant and rude to our community members who have legitimate questions. You may not like the fact that she's talking about a hypothetical lawsuit, but we've had plenty of lawsuits.
Yep.
And it's important for the public to know where that money comes from. That's a fair question. You're being ignorant by not letting them ask their questions.
Well, first of all, the question was asked and the question was answered by Mr. Subers. The secondary question was about a hypothetical lawsuit that stated an opinion on what might happen. Now, this school district has had lawsuits before, and they have lawsuits all the time. And
so if it goes over,
Mr.
so
Subers
where does the rest of the money come from? I think it's a fair question. I don't know why you seem to think that you can dictate what they ask, when they ask it, and how they ask it. You may be board president and have that gavel, but you're not the one in charge of all. I think
It
the
was,
community members have a right to ask a question during a
Mrs.
committee of
Lofton-
the whole
Mrs. Lofton
meeting.
asked a question about a hypothetical lawsuit. Mr. Subers mentions it comes from insurance. That's what he said.
Make sure you vote.
Well, that was the whole point of the question.
My
Ms.
question,
Evans, yeah.
my question was just, when is an appropriate time to have, I mean, we
So
used
when
to
you
have
fired
these.
an administrator, when you were the board president, where did it come from the budget when you lost a lawsuit?
Mr. Saylor, I'm
just curious.
asking you a serious question.
I'm curious. Where did it come from in the budget?
Okay, well, I think you have your facts wrong. We didn't fire anyone.
Where did it come from in the budget when the school district lost a lawsuit? It's a actually,
Mr.
it's a good
Saylor,
question.
I'm not trying to have an angry conversation here. I'm actually asking a question as to
Correct.
because our finance committee meetings have moved to a finance committee of the whole.
Yes.
I am asking
So, yeah.
when it is appropriate to have questions like that.
Right now, so let's not do hypothetical. In the budget that the school district had when they lost the lawsuit to the administrator that was fired and then rehired, where did that money come from?
Nobody was fired.
In the lawsuit that the school district lost, where the administrator was something that happened, where did that money come from? Where in the budget did that come from? Do you recall?
I'm not sure that was the question.
Sure. No,
that
the question was
asked.
specifically about a lawsuit, hypothetical.
And illegal actions.
Correct. So instead of going hypothetical, I'll go to something that actually happened on the previous board's majority. There was a lawsuit.
If I can.
No, I'm having a conversation with a
Okay.
board member.
I just wanted to refer to my question. So what my question was.
Yeah, you asked about a lawsuit.
So in the event that a lawsuit is settled out of court, where does that money come from?
I'm so confused.
Sure.
Our settlements to date have been paid by the insurance company, including settlements which were arrived through negotiations out of court, which also typically are made without admission of liability. And to my knowledge, the prior settlements that I'm aware of were all made without admissions of liability, and the settlement costs were covered by insurance.
Which you knew already since you were the board member at that time, but you're asking a question because there's an election tomorrow about a hypothetical lawsuit. So we can have these conversations, but let's not put on airs and be fake about it.
So I'm curious. You know what? Mr. Weaver has a finance report prepared, and you're right. We shouldn't be focusing on politics. So I'm going to allow Mr. Weaver to continue with his finance report. But I do think that it's important that all of our taxpayers are aware that these things do cost money.
Thank you. Go ahead. Well, do you have a question?
Yeah, I've only been coming to these meetings, recently this school year, and I just have to say, the smirks and the sarcastic comments back at the
You have a
public.
question?
You got to stop.
Do you have a
Please.
question?
Yes. Can you please stop
That's
being?
still not a question.
Yes, it is. I'm asking you a
Question about the
request.
budget?
I'm asking you to
You have a
stop being
question about the
disrespectful to the community.
The show will continue. Go ahead, Mr. Weaver.
Okay. So remember tonight's capital projects presentation. The capital projects presentation is a yearly presentation that we provide to meet the requirements of the law, to make sure that it's a living, breathing document and that we're all aware of the capital project needs of the school district. This is the same process that we've used ever since 2017, when the board at that time thought, and it was a really good idea for us to go out, and we had a professional architectural organization, engineering firm, come through and follow through with all of our capital projects at that time and all of our buildings and developed a document. We took that document. That document is still considered our living, breathing document. We took the guts of that document, uploaded it into an Excel spreadsheet. We've been keeping track of it ever since. Mr. Clemmer, prior to Mr. Fabrizio, and now Mr. Fabrizio, he's been here almost 2 whole years at this point in time. We've gone through, we've developed the strategy associated with a 0 to 5 year plan, a 6 to 10 year plan, and a 10+ year plan, depending upon the priority of these projects. I will freely admit that sometimes these projects, over the years, they change in their development, whether it's through an emergency, a safety issue, or something that we thought would last 10 years suddenly breaks down and it suddenly becomes an urgent necessary item that we address in 0 to 3 years, really, instead of leaving it in the 6 to 10 year column. Perfect example of that is the HVAC units that we instituted. We put the MERV 12 filters in. Instead of those motors and engines were built for MERV 8 filters. We ran them with the MERV 12s, and now we're continuously looking at our engines and our motors and all of our HVAC units to make sure that we didn't stress them. So that's just one of the things and one of the areas that we continue to look at. If you break it down, you look at $31 million, almost $31.5 million worth of estimated capital project costs as it stands tonight and as it's been developed and reviewed over the past couple of months. And you can see here we have $17 million, almost $17.5 million in years 1 through 5 as per our review. Years 6 through 10, it gets a little light at 1.5, and then years 10 plus 12.5. Some of these projects are listed on here, like you'll see one for the athletics associated with the Hilltop project. The Hilltop project was some part of that process associated with the athletic turf process that we did here. We specifically at the time split that into 2 projects. Project that we really needed for Keenan Stadium in the lower field, which is the baseball field. And then we said the Hilltop, it would be good if we had the wherewithal and the monies to go forward with a project and a program up top here outside of the cafeteria. However, we realized very quickly we have other priorities. So that is part of that list. The reality of that, probably not, but it's there until we decide to take it out. What we do now is we go down each individual building and we break that out. We have some quick little stats and details there. There are 26 projects for the high school. I'm not going to get into all of them. I'm just going to show you a quick summary sheet there of what some of those items are. The high school is the largest area. It has 2 slides to it, and those items are broken out there as listed. Now's not the time to get into these. You guys have these. You have questions, just let us know. We can break those out. A lot of these, they have matching ID numbers. You can see here on the left-hand side. All of those, if it says HS, MSE, MS West, whatever, those directly link to one of these books in this bag here, which is the original report. That has a lot of detail in it from the actual architects and engineers at the time, AEM architects, so we can dig that out. If, however, it's been a JFAB or a J Clemmer, that was an ad, i.e. the AEM people either missed it or the design and development that they had in there, we decided that we wanted to go somewhere different. So we started our own little JFAB or JClem that we did to look at that. Also, for this particular item, the asterisks show that it's already been included as a project in ESCO 5.0. So in this particular case, the replacement of 3 chillers, that's part of ESCO 5.0. So we've already approved that. Hopefully next year at this time, those units will be out, new units will be in, and that's one of those things that we can take off and we can show that we've accomplished that. Moving on to Perkiomen Valley Middle School East, there's the breakdown, about 17 projects. Probably one of the bigger projects that we are tracking is MSE 24, which is $4.3 million for the general mechanical HVAC. Please note that in Exhibit A of ESCO 5.0, there is $3.1 or $3.3 million specifically to address that item. So it's not all of that item, but a significant portion of that is in Exhibit A. And Mr. Subers, you have to correct me. We have until December 2024 to enact either finding monies for that with capital project monies or issue another bond issue to address that as part of that Exhibit A. It's in the back. There's about $7 million worth of projects. So we continue to monitor that. Moving on to Middle School West, we have about 12 projects. Probably the biggest thing there is the roof. And at this point in time, it's one of those areas that we know we need to address. It's a unique kind of roof. It's an EPDM roof. Joe, what does that stand for? Sorry. Okay.
It's a rubber roof.
It's a lettered roof.
Rubber.
And so interestingly enough, that's original to the building. So that's one of those ones that several years ago we went forward with, and we placed new roofs on a lot of our buildings. That's one of those that we did not do because it's a unique styled roof. And also the air handling units at West as well. Moving on to Evergreen, 21 projects, much smaller in scope, Evergreen, because this we handled in ESCO 5.0. We eliminated, removed all those old HVAC units. We addressed that, and we put insulation in. Much smaller area and focus for us. And $264,000 of that will be addressed in ESCO 5.0. Again, parts of projects we deemed as priority going forward. That may change according to different directors of operation, different finance directors, different school boards. Where are the areas of need? Schwenksville, 9 projects, even smaller in amount. Again, a lot of this was already taken care of. The biggest part of that is the chiller replacement and recommissioning associated, and again, that is an ESCO 5.0 project. Skip back, 913,500, and 17 projects, much smaller in scope. Again, a big portion of ESCO 5.0 addressed a lot of their issues and concerns associated with that. We are starting to see and starting to track and monitor paving and parking as being a major item for us. Remember, we can patch and we can patch and we can patch and we can fill cracks in. Eventually, we need to address the underlayment of those areas because what the patch means and what the cracks mean is that water is getting down there and seeping in there. So a total replacement, including the underlayment of those parking areas, is necessary. That's a much higher cost than just a simple patch. South, 6 projects, $321,000. South was a major focus of ESCO 3.0 to address the issues that we had at that point in time. So much smaller components there. The biggest thing at South is the PVAC athletic floor and the replacement of that. Athletics, $4.8 million. However, I will note $3.5 million is for the 2 synthetic fields at Hilltop. It's up there until we decide to take it off. You might notice that it's already 10 years plus out. So it's out there in case someone would like to pick up that ball and make a run with that, but it's just noted. Probably the biggest thing that we need to address for athletics is the concession stand as well. And we have been working on that. That is now down to $300,000 as our estimate, and we hope in December to come forward with the school board approval to knock that one out, to finally take care of that. We've did it in little pieces. We've done it in little pieces. We've addressed the sewer. We addressed the electric. We've done a little bit of things, but at this point in time, we really feel that we need to go out and get that project done. That'll be coming in December. And then district-wide administratively, we have $2.5 million. That's there. That was associated with our push for the new buildings and grounds from last year at this point in time. That's still there. You do know Dr. Smith, Dr. Russell, myself, and the entire cabinet, we've been working on potentially a different plan. You've seen different pieces of that. That is a big, big ticket item. And so maybe reflecting and looking at, perhaps looking internally at different ways that we can address that. We'll keep the board fully aware of that. Some capital projects that we completed this year, total $4.5 million. So in a year when we seem like, wow, we really didn't get a lot of stuff done, remember we kicked off ESCO 5.0. 2 major projects, Skip Back and Evergreen, those units were over $1 million. The scoreboard, of course, the oil tank conversion, natural gas, all of that stuff, the completion of ESCO 4.0, we are all considering all of those items as projects that we've completed from last year's presentation to this year's presentation. Some of those may have been in progress last year, but we didn't officially recognize them because they were not done. We are officially reflecting them at this point in time. Final piece to this, the capital projects. Where are the available funds coming for that? You might have noticed the $31 million. However, you know, Weaver said there's $3.5 million for Hilltop. That might not be, so we're under $30 million. In the bank right now, and this is a little bit of a different thing. We always are very curious and careful with our dates. I'm giving you, and Amy and I are giving you the exact details of the balances as of October 30th, okay? So it's a little different. This isn't as of June 30, so we have additional down draws on that. $8.9 million listed in those various fund balances over the years. Again, accumulated capital project over the years, bond series 2019 specific to an ESCO project. Those remaining monies are following through. 2020A was specific for the stadium. We've spent that down. We've met the 85% criteria for the 3 years of the bond. That's important. ESCO 4.0, that's coming to an end. We still have some monies left over and available in there for us to utilize. Bond series, the new bond series for ESCO 5.0, most of those monies will be spent for 5.0. We know that. And then a general fund balance reserve for capital projects that resides in the general fund of $3.4 million. And again, that resides in there. We all know that those monies are accumulated over the years. They could have been bond refundings. In the specific point of the ESCO projects, we borrowed specific dollars for the ESCO project. Guess what? We actually did the ESCO projects cheaper than what we thought the ESCO project was going to be. So we have some remaining funds left over. Could have been that we didn't utilize allowances because the projects went smooth and we didn't have any problems. Plus, there are motions and movements that the school board has made over the years to put monies away into those accounts as well to address capital projects moving forward. Okay, any questions on capital projects? Ms. White.
I'm just looking at the high school stuff, and I'm wondering if any of this includes the entryway, the safety upgrades.
Oh, so that's coming after this. So let me just double check, because the way that AEM did those and listed those items, I don't believe so. Oh yeah, so we added JFAB at the bottom. At the last one on the second slide, yes, install safety gates.
And I believe, Mr. Weaver, you're going to talk a little bit more about that later in your
Yes.
presentation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we ran with an estimate, and that the safety needs have grown a little bit. So Mr. Fabrizio will show you a little bit of a higher number than what we put in a couple of weeks ago.
But the safety gates are not the I think what Mrs. Evans-Brockett is speaking to is the vestibule, like coming into the high school. The safety changes there.
So is that what you were asking?
There were concerns presented by high school administration about the safety vestibule entrance.
So we are working with GKO on that, on a redesign, addressing a number of different issues. I believe it's the counseling center, the library. Dr. Russell?
Yeah, so we've looked at that, a different way of entering to create a greater, larger vestibule that's a little bit more distinct and delineated from individuals just being able to come into the lobby. We're also looking at how we might utilize this space and be more resourceful, as well as how we would expand office space for counseling center. So the architect actually gave us 2 renderings. We have questions about both, actually, and are still in conversation with high school administration about some of the highest priorities out of these particular considerations. And then we have to come back to the board with some concrete ideas. And they're still in conversation right now. We're still in conversation about those. But the vestibule is a piece of that.
Yes.
And we got some ideas.
Okay, so my request would just be that it is on our capital projects list so that it's not
Absolutely.
forgotten.
Yep.
Because I think addressing the safety concern, I get that we're looking at the library and all those other things, but number 1 to me would be that safety issue.
Clear.
What
Thank
is
you.
the 26,000 safety gate? Or the gate? That's the
yeah.
football gate, okay.
Okay, Ms. White.
So I appreciate the overview. It's been a little bit since we've had a full overview of the capital projects. So I'm wondering if it would be possible to have discussions about perhaps taking safety and operations back away from the finance committee meeting in light of the new budget formulas that you just spoke about. I think that these lists were developed with more known variables from what you've just said. Is that accurate, or?
So the SB calculation is based upon a revenue stream. I wouldn't necessarily tie it to this, but of course, when you talk about overall tax increases and our ability to do those, yes.
That's what I was getting at. So in terms of facilities management, I think that what needs to happen, and I think Mr. Fabrizio would probably agree, is that there needs to be some more creativity in not only prioritizing, but also actually coming up with solutions to achieve these things. I know that when, for budget purposes, none of those numbers are really, those are not actual numbers, right? They're just pie in the sky. I mean, there's truth to them. However, 120,000 is an even number. It's not the actual number of what it costs to perform the tennis court, refab or whatever. So I think that in order for that to really happen in a constructive and productive way is to actually take it off the finance meeting, be able to put heads down, figure out, especially with the costs that are going to be associated with some of the safety initiatives that we're going to be going forward with now that we're going to have, a security SPO force. I think that having those conversations separately so they can be brought to finance with proposals of how things are going to get paid for and then brought to the board, I think will be a much more productive and seamless presentation of costs. Because when you go through the capital projects, it's such a broad stroke overview. It doesn't actually get into the weeds of what actually is needing to be accomplished. And I think to Dr. Russell's point of talking about the work that's going on with architects, that's conversation and that's information that should be shared in a facilities meeting that community members have a chance to be a part of. We need to really be utilizing, I think, the strengths of our community. We have architects, contractors, facilities management people within our community that would really be appreciated to come to the table and help find solutions for the school district to be, productive and efficient with the spend of funds.
Duly noted.
So
Dr.
this
Campley.
is, had something I kind of wanted to say when we get to the safety at the Keenan Stadium slide, which is next coming up, but it goes along so well with what Ms. White had to say, because I do agree with her 100%. I think, for example, when we're talking about safety with the Keenan Stadium, and I'm sorry to kind of jump ahead on you, but talking about installing the card access slide, we've had many conversations about how can we make the football games and sporting events and any type of event that happens in that stadium be more safe. But I feel like if there was a way for everyone to brainstorm safety measures for the stadium before we actually start implementing things. Because I'm just thinking if we put in that access slide, but then we go back and we start talking about ways to be safer and somebody comes up with a way that requires some reconfiguration of the way the fences are in general, then it's kind of like, well, why did we put the card in, So I just think that having some of these conversations to brainstorm versus doing things in and of itself and not having a whole larger plan, I think would be helpful moving forward.
I wouldn't disagree that it's better to take it in chunks, and have a plan. Mrs. Bears.
Well, and that was my question. So you said we're not going to discuss it now. If the committee doesn't break up, when would we be having these discussions? So if this stays, I had a lot of questions, but I just want to know when you foresee a good time to have those discussions would be.
I guess I think that's the point, is that they have to happen now as part of the finance committee presentation. So, we could spend the next 2 hours talking about capital projects.
If not longer.
So I guess that's really kind of where I was. I've been saying that for since we got rid of the Safety and Operations Committee, actually. So, now in looking at this list and understanding how the budget's going to change, we have to make a choice as to how we're going to discuss and talk about these things. So if there are questions about this now, we have to have the conversation now, I believe. But going forward, I think we need to come up with a different solution.
Well, that is my question. I do have questions about some of, what was put forth. And so, but I just heard you say now's not the time to have these discussions. So I'm just trying to understand when you would like us to have those discussions, when it makes sense.
Mrs. Mares, you can certainly ask any questions that you have connected to capital projects this evening. I think what Ms. White is advocating for is that we shift into the future to having some more intimate discussions that engage community members who are interested. But if you have questions tonight, please feel free to ask Mr. Weaver.
Hear that. I guess what I'm asking is, when do we need to have our questions? When should we have our questions answered so that we can govern in an effective manner and make good decisions? For your purposes, for financial purposes.
I have Joe holding the book here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I will.
The floor is yours. We'll do the best we can. And look, if we need professional, some sort of engineering or architectural guidance, we'll
I'm
we'll
just
work on
trying
that.
to understand, and that's, I emailed you today, to be transparent, right, earlier, like around lunchtime. So I don't expect you to have everything, but looking at these really big ticket items that are 1 to 5 years, those were some of them I want to know why it is we really think we need them to be done.
Okay, so
And it's not just the
It-
floor is mine.
yeah, it
Anybody has questions?
really do. I know you Mrs. Mares, you provided some numbers
Mhm.
for the slides to match up the slides.
I did.
Okay. So for instance, and what I did was I went to the slide numbers that you provided. So slide 19, you say big ticket items. So I just picked out the largest numbered item on that slide.
Yep.
So most of those I think it's the next one, Dr. Russell. There you go. So the paving and parking, that ties directly into HS 27. So I can open up this book here and read to you and onto the record what HS 27 is.
Now, that seems like it's going to take a lot of time. I mean, I could also, I don't know how to proceed. I mean, right, there's a lot of money here that I just don't want to let go through without having a conversation about.
Remember, this is also just one phase. The other phase is the school board has to approve these projects.
Right.
Whether Joe and Jim say that this needs to be done next week, it doesn't really matter. We've got to recommend it, and then the board has to say why, or yes, or no, or where are the funds coming from. All of that process, this is just a report out. These are the things that we're kind of tracking. And, if we have questions and we have time, we certainly, absolutely go through this.
Or
And HS 27 comes from a survey that was done, a 5-year survey.
That's correct. Yep.
So everything that's in these presentations, board members have already had access to, because it's part of the 5-year survey plan. That's public information that a board member can look at and say. Now, this doesn't mean that, for example, for HS 27, paving and parking, that in the next 5 years, that it's going to cost $1 million, or in the next 5 years, it's actually even going to get done, because it could have to get done next year, or it could actually make it to, year 6 through 10 because of the health of the paving. But it's just off of the survey that gets done. And another survey is going to be conducted in, 2 years, right? We're up to?
We would probably recommend next year at
Next
this
year.
time, yeah.
And then all this changes again once the new survey is done. So everything that we see here, for the most part, is based off of survey information that was collected a few years ago, and it goes into when these projects are. When it gets down to the nitty-gritty, when we're actually going to say, hey, this is getting done, like we saw with the tennis courts, it gets individualized and gets talked about it in public for a while before it gets done. But all these little ticket items go to a survey that was conducted by the school board and by a survey company.
So I guess, I can come to district office, I guess, and review those books, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Instead
These
of
are
you
these are
sitting here
public
and reading.
documents, absolutely.
Okay, that's what I will do, because
Besides the
I
notes-
would like more information.
Besides the notes that Amy puts in here about me, we can take those out.
Okay, all right, helpful, thank you.
Ms. White.
So I guess the question could be, is it possible to have something put on the calendar for December, or I guess maybe January at this point, to really put in place some time to actually sit down and talk about this. And I understand that this particular presentation is broken up by building, which is very helpful because you can see the money that's been spent in certain buildings that have had more recent updates, et cetera. But I also think that within those buildings, the breakdowns need to be categorized a little bit more based on, health and safety concerns, facility issues, the roof, for example. Like, there are certain things that are nice to haves and certain things that are have to haves. And I think that what we've learned, especially with like the fleet vehicles, for example, if you don't address the things in a proactive manner, which is what I believe and I feel like you've done here, we'll end up with this huge, reactionary response of having to really take care of a whole bunch of things at once. So I appreciate the strategy of showing everything per building, but I think that there needs to be some delineation of priorities, and I don't know that in real time that's a board meeting is really the best place for that to happen. So if administration can commit to have this information parsed a little bit differently and in a more digestible way, I think that you can talk about paving across district, you can talk about roofs across district, you can talk about HVAC across district, and then we can make decisions as to which one is the most important at which time. And then, just like the fleet vehicles, you can have your rolling plan, just like the Chromebooks, we can have a rolling plan for replacement. And I think that would probably help, especially people that don't have facilities knowledge, in their back pocket. It would really help digest the information in a way that taxpayers understand that $4.5 million was spent, but that wasn't an impact to their taxes. That was broken up in these different, not everybody has the same level of familiarity with it. So it looks like a scary number, but it's not really a true representation of how that money was spread around.
Right. And
so
considering we have $350 million worth of insurable values.
And that means very little to some people.
Correct.
So that's where I think in packaging this information, you kind of have to really, I don't want to say, but you see what I mean by that. And I also think that, like I said, within the buildings, I think there needs to be different priorities. Safety, obviously, health and safety would be the number one priority, especially for things like, ventilation and security of doors and things.
Definitely love to see if we could do some sort of committee that focuses on like the vestibule, like Mrs. Sarah Evans Brockett brought up, and how the safety and security of the football stadium, to see how we can prioritize money and make sure that those projects occur and that they're comprehensive and not just like little, oh, we're going to do this, oh wait, but that doesn't work because we should have done X, Y, and Z. I want to see like an actual well thought out plan with priorities as far as what are we doing first, second, third, and how are we getting to that optimum sense of security.
And the recognition that our reserves, once they're spent, they're gone, right?
Right,
And
that's
if
why
we
I
issue a
just wanna be
bond issue,
careful.
then there are tax consequences. So we're very aware of that.
Mrs. Mayor, just so you're aware, in the board docs library under facilities and athletics is the AEM Architects Master Plan and Athletics Facility Plan Study. So that whole book that he has there is in our library.
I appreciate that because I need to look at that, but as a board, what ultimately happens when we have these projects is we have to decide which you give us the priorities and then we either agree or ask for more information or ask, come up with a different way to move. So thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions from the community?
I do.
Okay.
You said that you're RFQs for these projects.
So it depends. If it's through the ESCO, that there's an ESCO process for that. If it's a formal bid over $25,000, it would definitely be a formal bid process. It would be publicly advertised. You have to do at least 5 weeks, 3 weeks advertising, 1 week in the front end, 1 week in the back end. Then the 6th week, you actually collect the bids back and then review them. We also can utilize CoStar's KPN. We've utilized a lot procurement services as well. So we kind of navigate that with Mr. Fabrizio, myself, Dr. Russell, Mrs. Hurd oftentimes, and we talk about what the best way is to get this job done. Is it an urgent project that we really need to pay attention to? Or is it something that's really, really big that we can get much benefit going out and getting really competitive bids if the market is really good for us? And the law mandates that. Regardless of what I say, the law mandates that we have to go forward with certain processes, and we usually call Mr. Subers just to make sure we're in good shape. Good question.
So I do have a question, I'm sorry. So my vision isn't good enough, I'm told. Is there anything up there that addresses changing restroom facilities to help, I guess, pull the programs together to handle the volume of kids that are going to need the single restrooms? In other words, with the mess that we've created with the transgender situation, are we doing anything to set budget aside to make facilities changes to meet the needs of our students?
At this point, our principals have identified single-use restrooms that would be for student use only versus those that would be for staff use only. So we have not looked at necessarily adding more single-use restrooms at this point in time, but we are talking about updating some of the restroom facilities in the district, and we have looked at some different designs for different restrooms, but we have not come forward with any sort of recommendation or proposal at this point.
So is there a time that will happen? I'm just, thinking about the students who are missing classes or waiting in line, or who might be uncomfortable using the public bathroom, whatever the case may be. Is there a time frame to helping them through facilities management find a restroom that's going to be satisfactory to them?
We haven't necessarily laid out a defined timeline, but that's something that we could start to think about, certainly. And we continue in conversation with our principals about the level of need and how we might think about providing or affording greater access to that style bathroom.
So,
I have a question. Why hasn't that conversation started yet, given that this policy was voted in over a month ago, and I have a kid that can't go to the bathroom? So why hasn't that conversation started?
As I mentioned, the conversation has started, and we have started to explore how we can designate restrooms to accommodate the needs on the part of our students and staff. If we're not meeting the needs of your son, we need to really explore that further, and that warrants some additional conversation. But we have also looked at some different designs for restrooms and considered what might be possible, as well as upgrading some of our very old restrooms, considering, for example, stalls as opposed to urinals to create some more privacy. So there are lots of ideas that are happening. So the conversations have been initiated.
I'm glad to hear that. We've heard a lot about tennis courts and basketball courts and things like that, but my kid can't pee. So why isn't that being prioritized?
I think if when we kind of come back, what Ms. White's saying is there's not a whole lot of time in this committee of a whole type of setting to kind of get down to the nitty gritty of different concerns that are in the district, whether it be safety or the bathrooms. I think that a safety and facilities or safety and operations meetings where there can be more brainstorming opportunities and then have it brought back with, okay, this is what came out of that meeting, may be more beneficial, and we might be able to move the timeline of things along a little bit faster and be able to have more responses to the community faster than if we are waiting till once a month to have this committee meeting and we're trying to squeeze it all in one sitting.
I love that, sorry. Okay, safety upgrades at Keenan Stadium, as was previously mentioned. We're looking at installing a card access slide and pedestrian gate at the stadium. CoStar's was $47,850. You may notice that I had $26,000 because this plan is kind of had an evolution. What?
That's a different project.
Okay, never mind. Okay. Well, how do we move? Okay, never mind. Okay. Safety upgrades at Keenan Stadium. There you go. This would give us the capability to schedule opening and closing of the facility from an off-site area. We can lock it down. We can open it up, and it mainly addresses the student gate and the main pedestrian gate there. The CoStar's cost is $47,850. Mr. Fabrizio, anything to add to that?
So this will tie into our current card access system that we deployed and wrapped up last year. Like Mr. Weaver said, we can schedule openings and closings. I've wandered across, just coming to the board meeting, kids playing out in the middle of the field at night. That's to help keep them out of there and secure it.
Okay, any questions on that?
Question about that.
Yes, Ms. White.
So if you can go back to the other previous slide. So I guess my question would be about the access, the potential access that the community then can have for these facilities of the track, et cetera, the tennis courts.
Yeah, this is just the stadium.
This is just the stadium.
This is just, but that's the track though. So I guess, I think that when we were talking about putting the track in the way that it was really, that stadium is for our whole community to enjoy. I understand security reasons, during the day, et cetera, but our community should be allowed to have access to the track, et cetera. So I don't know if this type of solution necessarily that wouldn't allow them access without a swipe, or what else could be done? Could we put in security cameras? Could we put in some other sort of accountability device? I don't know what that would be per se, but.
So we're currently in the process of deploying, we came up with new signs for the campus that it will be closed at dusk. So this is to secure that area at dusk. And we can schedule it open for events for the community to come in at X amount of time. Then the gate will close, and then they have free exit out of the runner's gate, we call it.
Okay.
So no one will be trapped in there. Now, I've heard stories where there was a lady trapped in there because we didn't know she was in the bathroom. They locked the gate, and then she's trying to climb the fence, and it was bad.
So that would be
This will alleviate that, us chaining the gate shut, then people can get out.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on that one? Any questions from the public? Okay. This is, go ahead.
This is still different. Yeah. Okay, so infrastructure to all the upgrades is important. So I'm proposing that we run conduit from the lower turf field to the high school to get data down there, which will allow us to install cameras, monitor the area, as well as other technology needs down there, and then run a conduit from the current concession stand to the field house. Again, we can, once that conduit's in, we lay the infrastructure, we can have, the sky's the limit out there. For athletics, we can have, I know they need a video stream for the players and the coaches to look at. There's no data out there to do that now. Once the infrastructure's out there, we can add cameras or lock the bathrooms down. My biggest concern at the field house now is that the bathrooms are open all the time. Someone walks in there, someone could be hiding in there, or, I'd like to have them card access locked down when the stadium's locked. So that's what that cost is.
Any questions? Any questions from the public on that?
Can you explain the card access?
Sure, so like my badge, it's my ID, and it
The general
lets me
public
in.
is allowed to use the track, right?
Yes. So the gates will be open. I don't know what time the general public's allowed in, but they'll be open for the general public to use at X time and then be locked down at dusk, at dark.
Okay, but they wouldn't have access to the bathroom if card access is added.
Well, we can time things open. So say Monday through Friday, the bathrooms are open from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. At 6:01, they lock. You can still get out if you're in there, but you won't be able to gain access.
Okay, thank you.
So we're talking about now closing the track Saturdays and Sundays and in the summertime? No, Saturdays and Sundays, it sounds like They're closed.
I'm not sure of the schedule at this time.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that. That's definitely come up with the athletic director and in our conversations.
I understand closing it at dusk, January to December. It's dark out. You don't want anyone on the property. But on a normal Saturday morning, the track area and running down from east, the street that goes from east of the high school is filled with dog walkers and filled with people running the track and getting exercise.
Yeah, we can schedule that open. That's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
Yep.
That should remain open. And just like we have the no trespassing sign, we should have signs that says track is closed, at dusk. And, if you're in there, you can always get out, but you can't get in. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it is a public field. Ms. Lofton?
So, in my experience being part of Music Boosters and being very involved with the marching band storage shed, including a lot of our tools, as well as our trailer that we use to take equipment to competitions, is within the perimeter of the gate. So would members who need to get in and out to access as volunteers be able to get in and out within this new system? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Anyone that has access now can get in. I know a lot of band people do.
Right. So
as
that's
well as
going to be
volunteers.
preserved.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and actually, Joe can go in the system then and create their cards so that they can do that. Whereas now, if the gate's locked and somebody forgets, then we've got to come in, we've got to open up the gate. Somebody has to come in and do that.
So overall, what you're proposing really does provide more control over the situation but also allowing it to be more flexible.
Correct.
And the idea is to eliminate some of the keys that are out there. There are a lot of keys out there in the hands of a lot of different people over the years, and we're really trying to eliminate that, rein that in.
And to recognize the technology capabilities now as well.
The other nice thing too is when you have the key cards, everyone that swipes, it's logged. So if anything were to happen, you can go back and look through the log, who has been in here, which is another layer, which I think is helpful to have as well.
It really reestablishes accountability, whereas now with those keys, they've been out there for 40 years now. Okay. So we have very good audit results for 22-23. The main reason is, thanks, Joe. The main reason is that on the revenue side, we really exceeded our budget, which is a positive. We had earned income tax and realty transfer taxes almost $2 million over budget. Again, that shows the strength of the economy and how it impacts those line items, which is a positive. Investment earnings, we talked about interest earnings, and the rates went from a 0.01, they're above 5 now, and that was $1 million more than what was budgeted. There was an unbudgeted revenue source from PlanCon reimbursements. Remember, when we have bond issues and we pay a bond payment, the state shares and gives us back some of those dollars in the terms of a PlanCon reimbursement. PDE is kind of not staffed fully now. And so some of these PlanCon reimbursements were sent out years ago. And we caught up to them with the help of Jamie Doyle. We submitted them, resubmitted them, and then they recognized an additional revenue stream of $1 million. So that's a positive, and that's a one-time flow that we won't see again. $500,000 in additional basic education subsidy. I mentioned that we are very curious about how that's going to impact us. That's why I volunteered us, because this year we exceeded our budget. So however those 6 variables stacked up, according to the state, we received more money than what we predicted. Now, my concern is that some of these variables move in the opposite way, and then we get impacted negatively over the future years. So we've really got to understand how that's going to work. And then, of course, the $700,000 in revenues that we recognize for ESSER. Remember, it was recommended, and professionally, we did not budget for either ESSER monies on the revenue side or the expenditure side. So when we recognize that, that shows an additional dollar figure on the federal side. So overall, when you combine those and you combine the expenditures, it is a positive influence of about $5 million between the two. What does that mean for us? Well, we also know that we have an Act 1 index One of those items that it caps is our unassigned fund balance at 8% of our general fund budgeted expenditures. In the calculation, that essentially means that we need to transfer $4.3 million from unassigned fund balance where it currently resides into capital projects, into reserve for PESers, something along those lines, to move it out of the unassigned fund balance and into these reservation type of funds. This is a common practice. This is a fairly large number because we had a good surplus this year. And so we can talk about that. And next Monday, we'll have a motion on the floor to move that $4.3 million officially from board action to move it into the reservation accounts, capital projects, or wherever we would like to move those items. And then that will be the final piece to the annual financial report that we report to the auditor. And then the auditor puts that in, and then we submit the 2057, and then that fiscal year is done. Any questions on that? Any questions from the community? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. So, 5.02, it's the approval of the Alteris Systems Maintenance Contract. The recommended action is a motion to approve the Alteris Systems Maintenance Contract as presented. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we can move that to consent. 5.03 is the approval of the Audiovisual Services Contract. The recommended action is a motion to ratify the Audiovisual Services Contract. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, we can move that to consent. 5.04, approval of the 23-24 special ed contracts and cost of services. Motion to approve the contracts. Are there any questions or comments? That's a consent. 5.05 is a placeholder for next week. 5.06 is the approval of the 23-24 bus drivers and aides. Motion to approve bus drivers, subs, aides employed by STA. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move that to consent. And 5.07 is reports, grants, and donations.
Thank you very much. Payment of bills, Ms. Mayers.
Thank you. We will be ratifying this and approving these next week.
Thank you very much. Professional personnel, Mr. Dorr.
Thank you. 7.01 through 7.04 is on consent. 7.05 is a placeholder. 706 through 711 is on consent. 7.12 is a placeholder. 7.13 is motion to approve memorandum of agreement as presented. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, we can please move that to consent. 7.14, it's a motion to approve staffing services agreement. Are there any questions? Move to consent, please. And 7.15 is a motion to approve a separation and release agreement. Any questions?
There's no attachment on
Yeah,
here.
why isn't there attachment?
So,
Actually, we should note this as a placeholder. It's not ready yet, and Mr. Moran and I will give you some additional explanation in follow-up based on some the progress.
Okay, 7.15 is now a placeholder. And that ends my section.
Thank you very much. Support personnel, Dr. Campley.
8.01 through 8.03 are on consent. 8.04 is a request to take action for the approval of the school police officer appointments. I believe there are five of them, and the motion is for this evening. I make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one question.
Ms. Mayers?
I did ask it, but let's see. For Mr. Moreno's resume, what is a certified clean operator?
Yes, so Mr. Moran and I did learn that a CLEAN operator, CLEAN is an acronym for Commonwealth Law Enforcement Assistance Network. That's what CLEAN stands for. And what it essentially boils down to is this individual has gained access to particular databases and files based upon some training and certifications that he has received.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Okay, 8.05 is also a request for action. There's a motion to authorize solicitor to file petition to appoint 5 school police officers as listed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing none.
Mr. Saylor, if I may, Mrs. Mayor's just pointed out, it does say 5 school police officers in the motion. If it's all right, we'll revise that to represent 4.
This is where I knew there was something with 4, not 5. It was on this one. So should I make a different motion?
Yeah, we're just gonna, Dr. Campley, if I might amend the motion to change the, yeah, Pete has it right, change it from 5 to 4.
Okay,
Is there a second to that?
second.
Yeah, second.
Okay, great. We're
All
good? All right.
So we'll fix this
Yep.
to be a motion to authorize for 4 school police officers as listed. And hopefully we'll get another one soon. And do I have a second?
Any questions? Seeing none, do you have a question, Dr. Ross?
The only thing I was going to offer is that Mr. Hewlehue has already had his petition approved by the board back in August. That's why he's not here, but he,
That's why he's not on this list.
I think it has to say 5 and 4, because he resigned in the one position, and then he is now being approved to the new position. And then the second item, 8.05, that's just for 4,
people,
because the
correct.
5th
Correct.
was already taken care of.
Correct.
So it is correct the way it's reflected.
except it says 5 and it should say 4.
That part,
Yes,
right.
but you're right.
But the people's names.
Yes.
But
Yeah, so
but
just
it's
to-
I was just trying to offer some
Just-
explanation
just to-
as to why he wasn't on this list but was on the list prior.
Dr.
That's all.
Smith, just to confirm, so it's a motion to authorize solicitor to file petition to appoint 4 school police officers as listed: Robert Early, Leo Vogel, Fred Marino, Greg Voorhees. Hopefully I got all those names right. We had the motion made by Dr. Campley, the second made by Mr. Dorr. Seeing that, are there any questions? Okay, there are none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the ayes have it.
And 8.06 is on consent. That ends my section.
I should have
sorry.
noticed this earlier. There is not a list of appointments under the Title I and Project Silver
Oh,
appointments.
yeah, you're right.
So we actually need to remove this from consent.
We will make that notation. Thank you.
And then we'll revisit it next week, correct? Okay. So now that ends my section.
Governance, Mr. Keenan.
9.01, we have a first reading on policies, and does this move to consent? Because I would like 109 to not be on consent.
It's not a consent issue, but what are you
First
asking
reading
for?
and then the second reading. I mean, I'd like to discuss 109 at the board level.
You are here.
Right, and my position on 109 is that I believe we, as a school district, should have as part of our, it's not, weeding is the wrong word because that's used elsewhere, in our selection guidelines, that we should not select sexually explicit materials. So I think that that's lacking. I don't know why we can't put that in here. It doesn't cause anybody any harm. It doesn't cause any harm to any books. It's the selection process and a
Would you be
potential-
amendable to the terminology that says sexually explicit materials as defined by the superintendent?
Well, it's really as defined as in 18 PA CSA 5903.
Yeah, so our issue ad nauseum for the past year has been, how do we define sexually explicit? And so through policy committee, we've had discussions on what sexually explicit means. We've heard from Mr. Subers, we've heard from the policy committee, we've heard from the committee citizens that are on the policy committee, we've heard from people through emails, and we haven't been able to come through a definition of what it is.
Well, I've had the
Yeah.
same definition
No,
for 2
correct.
years,
Yes.
and that's Pennsylvania law.
Yes.
Under 5903, and sexually explicit materials is defined in 2 different ways, and the definitions are present in the statute for the 2 well, there are various parts to one part of the definition, but there's obscene materials, and then there's essentially sadomasochistic materials. But those are two branches of what is defined as sexually explicit materials. And I think that, the statute exempts libraries from criminal enforcement, and that's great. I mean, I understand that. That's fine. It doesn't say that libraries have to have this material. And I would like to say that we do not stock this material for our students.
Yeah. The issue has been we have not been able to, as a board, there was an original 109 that failed the board 5-4, right? There was a secondary 109 that went to the policy committee meeting that just didn't get the agreement. Nobody agreed on the term sexually explicit. I don't think anyone disagrees with that on the board level, that we have not been able to anywhere, whether it's as a committee or as a board, agree to where we would get 5 votes to pass what we believe sexually explicit might be. You and I probably agree more than we disagree on that terminology, but others disagree on that terminology. My caveat would be if we say sexually explicit as defined by, the superintendent and assistant superintendent, those are the people the board hold accountable for actions. Those are the 2 employees that work for the board. I don't know if other board members would agree to that. I don't know if Dr. Russell and Dr. Smith at this time, or whomever the next person is, would agree to that. But it's the first thing that came into the brain is maybe that is something that we could at least get that verbiage on there with the caveat of as defined by the person that sits in that chair.
I think that's a discussion that needs to go back to policy then, to have the conversation as to whether or not the committee feels that that is an appropriate addition, and then it can come to the board.
And as
It
Moses
should not
said,
be a conversation.
so it shall be done. We'll pull it from the meeting tonight and put it back to policy.
All right, so we have 901, and we will have a first reading on 143, 44, 823, 825, 827, 912, and not 109.
Yes,
So we'll go back
that
to
is
policy.
correct.
All right, and 902.
Mr. Keenan, I'm sorry, if I may, before you move on to the next item, I think Dr. Smith and I just want to be very clear on the goal. We want to look at that definition again of sexually explicit, or currently in the policy it indicates maturity level. I think is that where we're focusing as we bring policy 109 back to the committee? Would that be accurate?
Well, it wasn't exactly what I had said. I mean, I have sort of my view, but not that it's, but when it goes back to the policy, the idea being discussed among the board was that there would be some limitation on sexually explicit materials that would involve discretion, the discretion of the superintendent and the, who else?
As described by
Just the superintendent.
superintendent and their, usually policy is a superintendent and their designee.
So,
Dr. Russell, not to throw that at you.
I mean, maybe there
We need
are.
to talk about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's plan to discuss it in policy committee, but I wanted to make sure, Mr. Keenan, that we were capturing what it is you're focused on in terms of the policy language.
I think
If
Mr.
it goes
Keenan,
back to policy.
I think Mr. Keenan is focused on the original language in the policy that was first put out.
Some restriction on sexually explicit materials. Some,
Okay.
some
Do you have a, Ms. Mears, you have a-
evaluation of that.
Yes, I appreciate that because I'm not supportive of policy 109 as it's for the first read. So if it goes back and.
Yeah, I like
that might
Dr.
be a-
Campley's suggestion. We'll send it back to the policy committee.
Yep.
And there is a policy meeting in November. And then there's a reorg, and you'll see what happens with that. You did 9.02, or you're doing it now?
I was just
Mr.
doing.
Saylor, I'm sorry.
I apologize,
Could I
yeah.
just comment about 109?
Yes.
Because I agree with you. I think we've gone round and round on exactly the topic that's come up again.
Yes.
So I'm not sure sending it back to are we going to keep going round? Is it the will
I
of the
would
full
say
board to
tomorrow
send
will
it back?
tell us what happens at the policy committee meeting.
All right.
9.02?
9.02, we have policies for second reading. Can we move that to consent?
They're just up for second reading.
Just up for second reading. Any comments?
Nope.
That's it, end my section.
Comments from the audience? Oh, hold on, her first, and then you. Yeah. Can you just turn the mic on?
Oh.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill Hall from Collegeville. And I just want to say that what happened earlier in this meeting when we were talking about the lawsuit question, you guys might know all the ins and outs of how that works. We do not. So we deserve to hear the answers to those kinds of questions. As a young high school student said a few weeks ago, this is not about you. This is about the community, and you have to let us participate, otherwise it's never going to work. So moving forward, I think we would all appreciate it if the comments from the community, the questions from the community were taken seriously and addressed as such, even if you don't feel that they meet your standards, because it is important to the rest of us. Thank you.
Tracy Henn, Park Gilman Township. My son's a senior, and I just started attending these meetings. And the antics I've seen, the raised voices, the disrespect for board members is ridiculous. The desires to keep pornography in the libraries and the SPOs out of schools is disheartening. The double standards I've heard in these meetings and prior meetings that I've watched are out of control. Tomorrow is Election Day. Tomorrow's the day we decide if we continue this social experiment, holding hands and singing Kumbaya, or if we back our teachers and our administration to bring education back to the forefront. Thank you.
Any other comments from the community? Seeing none, comments from any board members?
As I said earlier, I've been coming to these board meetings for the last couple months, and you know, it's quite a different experience than when you watch them online. The body language, the smirking, the smart comments, the glares, the staring, just the body language and the disrespect towards each other as a board and towards the community is ridiculous. You guys are elected officials. Be professional. And when we ask a question from the community, we're asking because we need and want to know an answer. We're trying to understand. And when we ask to reach out and have productive conversations with you and we get ignored, that's not acceptable either. You guys need to get it together. You guys got to work together. Regardless of what happens with this election tomorrow, your behavior as a board, as the leadership of this school board needs to change, because it's quite pitiful, actually. And there you go, roll your eyes and take a deep breath, Mr. Saylor. I'd like to suggest that for future board meetings that this camera be pointed at all of you, because you can't see you guys when you're watching this on YouTube. You can see the back of the people's heads and the people who comment, hello, but nobody, very few, just a few handful over here, and you conveniently sit where you can't be seen, but you sit there and smirk and make all kinds of comments, Mr. Saylor, through the entire meeting. You're combative, you're bullying, and your behavior has to stop. And for those in the community, again, for those of you in Springford, look out, because these Moms for Liberty people are coming for you. So please, get out there and vote. Get these 5 for BV clowns out of here, seriously, because they do not have our children in their best interest. It's about their politics, their political careers, their campaign funding. That's all they care about. They don't care about these kids. They don't care about my kid. My child cannot go to the bathroom, Mr. Fountain, Mr. Saylor, Miss Mears, Mr. Keenan, and Mr. Dorr, and Mr. Cohen, and anybody else who's on that side. What is wrong with this picture when you are passing policies that hurt children? They can't go to the bathroom. I want you tomorrow, every single one of you, just practice. I want you to come to work. I want you to leave your house. I want you to commute to your workplace and not go to the bathroom at all tomorrow until you get home tomorrow night. Just try it for one frickin' day. Just one day, try it and see how you feel. See how your body reacts. See how healthy that is for you. So I'm sure you're all proud of the decision that you made, but it's ridiculous. You guys all need to get it together.
Thank you.
Stop hurting children.
Would anyone else from the audience like to speak? Seeing none, comments from the any board members?
Vote for PV forward.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm going to say a few things because years of being yelled at. I'm going to just share a little bit. I do own my decisions. And some of these topics that have been difficult this year, we have community members that support some on one topic that's fraught with a lot of emotion and struggle, and community members that support another. It doesn't mean that there has to be anger, yelling, pointing of fingers, raised voices. None of that has to occur. So, there are many in our community who have supported.
If you speak out again, I'll have security remove you.
There are many in our community who have supported asking that library books that fit the definition of pornography not be brought into our school library. It has nothing to do with what children are supported or not. They're pornographical books. And I have not ever responded to students in minority groups calling them less than. And if I ever did misspeak verbiage, I've gone out of my way to make it clear that I do support all students and I care for all students, and different policies are that we have. Some people as a student feel supported and others don't. But of course, we follow the law. I've always respected all students regardless of what makes them different, unique, whatever. That's the great thing about public school. So I just wanted to clear that up. Thank you.
Any other board members wish to speak? Mr. Dorr?
On a lighter note, I just wanted to wish Dr. Lori Smith the best of luck. Thank you for your service to Perkiomen Valley. I think you're going to do very well at Upper Dublin. I'm sorry to see you go.
Any other board members like to speak?
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Dr. Campley?
Do we have one more week with you, though?
You have one more
Yeah,
week.
I was going to say, I thought we have one more week. So I know Dr. Russell already kind of mentioned a thank you to our board members who are leaving us. But and I know that we have another week with you, but because it was already brought up, I want to thank Dr. Kohler and Mrs. Evans-Brockett for your service. I really hope that we continue to see you as your wonderful advocates of students, and I look forward to hearing your voice as a community member. I hope I hope you don't go MIA on us. And while I'm going to miss both of you very much, I do really look forward to where we go with things from here. I think sometimes a little bit of a shakeup is necessary, and we have 5 seats open, so I hope everybody gets out and votes, and that we can continue to progress and move PV forward.
Are there any other board members who'd like to speak? Seeing none, I'll just end by saying first to Ms. Evans-Brockett and Dr. Kohler, thank you very much for your time. I know you have another board meeting left. You served our school district in one of the worst times in our country over 100 years. You served our school district during a pandemic, and you served your time very honorably. More importantly was the work that you did outside of the school board. It wasn't enough just to be school board members, but the work that you did with PV Powerbacks, Ms. White as well. To Ms. White, Mr. Dorr, and Ms. Mayers, good luck tomorrow. Thank you for your willingness to continue to serve to the school board, and thank you for the work that you've also done in this school district, again, serving through COVID. Some school districts don't even have board members that want to run. We are really blessed in this community to have 10 board members who want to serve. And obviously, I have 5 board members I would like to see win, But we have 10 board members that this school board will be very happy to have. And other school boards would love to have 10 people openly and willingly wanting to run. So it's really impressive that our small community that has one at-large election, not broken down by regions, has 10 quality people wanting to serve this school district. Serving a school board is time-consuming. You're spending time away from your friends and your family, and you're consumed with business of the school district. And it's honorable that we have people that want to run, and it's honorable that tomorrow we will, hopefully, people will go out and vote for not just a new school board, but vote for a plethora of things. And I hope everyone doesn't stay home, because anytime you stay home, you're really not doing the one thing that's guaranteed in our Constitution, which is your right to vote. So to the board members who serve, thank you so much for your time. To the 10 individuals who are running, good luck and Godspeed in the work ahead for our school district. 10.03 is a notice of voice recording disclaimer, and this meeting is adjourned.